Klaxoon.
Hey Tim, it's Klaxoon.
Welcome everybody for another Klaxoon live talk. It's great to see so many of you attending each time. Regulars that I recognize and new faces as well. My name is Matt and I'll be your host today, as we'll be discussing remote work and, can I say it, old hat jazz. Quite a buzzword these days. We'll be discussing it with our guest Brittnee, who I'll introduce in a second. But remote work is something that a lot of us have experienced from one day to the other at the start of the pandemic. A topic today which can be quite polarizing, giving cold sweats to HR at large organizations on one side, while being something that workers want to incorporate in their routine. Just showing how multifaceted remote work can be, with, in fact, a lot of different realities under one generic term. Remote work is a dynamic that Klaxoon's been addressing since day one, back in 2015, with tools that you can use from any device, from anywhere. Might you be working on the go from a smartphone or a mobile device? Might you be sitting at home behind a laptop or working on a Klaxoon board on a large touchscreen at the office? Our interface is designed to be displayed as efficiently and allow you to get things done, whatever the situation you're in. But I'll stop here for the promotional pep talk. That's not why we're here. The aim for today is actually to help you see things more clearly with our guest as we ask her a lot of questions, but one overarching question. And the one is, can you actually work from anywhere? And before introducing our expert, just a couple of reminders on logistics about this live talk. We'll be discussing with Brittnee for about 15 minutes or so before taking your questions. So you can start sending your questions for Brittnee at any time. You can start now. Might you be connected on Zoom or on LinkedIn? And we'll make sure that these questions get addressed in the Q&A part at the end. That's it for the logistics. Now for a couple of words about our guest speaker today. For quite some time, and in the current configuration since 2015, Brittnee Bond's traveled the world and has had the opportunity to work from a lot of different places. She's currently calling us from Thailand, if I'm not mistaken, where she created a co-living space for remote workers. Brittnee's been recently nominated as a remote enabler in a 2022 Remote Influencer Report. Brittnee, a warm welcome to this live.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
And well, actually, before deep diving on remote work, we have tons of questions for you. Would you mind introducing yourself in more detail, a bit about your career journey, what got you here and what you care for?
For sure, yeah. I'm originally from California. My background's in intellectual property law, so I did that for 6 years. I always wanted to work remotely. I was always trying to get my law firm to let me work remotely, and they were like, no. And then I started helping my law firm go paperless. I did this at 3 different firms with the selfish intention to ask them to go remote for me personally.
Okay.
And the third time I did it, they said yes, the third place I worked at. And I ended up working and living in Costa Rica the first time. I'd never lived in a foreign country by myself. I just moved to Costa Rica and worked from there. And this is back in like 2014 when remote work wasn't, like digital nomad, like working remotely abroad was not a term yet. I didn't know anyone else. It wasn't a thing,
yeah.
No, it wasn't a thing. And then I wanted to make it more of a thing. So I moved to New York City and got the highest paying job I could in a law firm. And then on the side, with 2 other people, built a startup where we hosted remote workers and did like pop-ups around the world. Like 1 country a month, we would host a group of 30 and show them around, and we work on our own stuff, but then like support each other. And that's kind of how I started building communities around the world, because a lot of the co-working spaces I go to, like in some remote town in Croatia or Italy, didn't know anything about remote work. So I would start teaching them, and then I started learning, and then I started helping people like launch co-working spaces, co-living spaces. And then Thailand has always been my home, like for like 6 or 7 years now. And when the pandemic happened, I on purpose ran back here. Like I knew it was coming, and I wanted to get locked down here. And in the last 2 years, I've been kind of like cultivating my own space here because I feel like this is my home. So I still want to travel and consult and do all that, but I want to come home to my own community of people here that I love, and eventually can have my own kids into. And I think this is the next evolution of remote work that we're seeing, is people living abroad and having families and digital nomad, everything. So I can get super nerdy about it, but yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Okay, thanks for sharing. And you've been saying, I mean, you've been in that, I don't know, space, if we can say it, for quite some time. You've been thinking, sleeping, breathing remote work for a while now, way before it was a thing as we coined it before. What are the changes you've noticed, from the days where it was mostly about trailblazers, and today, remote work is on everyone's mind. If you're an office clerk, if you're a high-paid banker, that term speaks to people. It might hold different definitions behind it. We'll get to talk about this, but what are the differences you've noticed over the past few years and that acceleration that the pandemic created?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been super into trying to create more opportunities for people to work remotely. So even when I was out here, like living abroad, I was always consulting my friends' companies or like teams that would reach out to me, like, how do we work remotely? And I was always promoting it. But I felt like a lot of people didn't, usually with tech teams or ones who already had like the tech tools to work remotely. That was the teams that I was working with consulting before. And now the companies that are coming to me asking for consulting are like, 500 to 1,000 or 5,000 employees. And I'm just like, okay, yes, we can do this. And the difference I find too is when there's an intention of wanting to do it from a holistic standpoint, you take it a lot slower, and you implement it, and you set a good foundation, you onboard people. The pandemic just like dropped everyone into it. And so I think there's been some like, I don't want to say backpedaling, but like now that people can go back into the office, this is why hybrid is such a big deal, because people were not prepared to work remotely. A lot of them didn't have the tech tools or the management tools to manage remote teams. And so now they're trying to bring people back in the office. People don't want to necessarily go back into the office. So there's this like struggle of trying to figure out how to manage it and do it in a way that's sustainable, while also keeping their top talent, employees that are like, no, I know what the freedom feels like to work remotely, and I'm not going back in the office. So I'm in the middle trying to like keep everyone happy.
Okay, so currently, I mean, digesting at scale from large organizations, right? And trying different things and figuring out how they can roll this out at scale. I mean, what's ahead of us in the next few months, few years? I mean, what are your thoughts about remote work becoming, and that's also a buzzword, the new normal? Do you think it can be applied at scale, or still reserved to specific jobs or trades?
I think the future is 100% going to be remote. I think people are not going to go into offices in the same way that they were before. Just like the offices are based on the third industrial revolution, where we had to work in a factory and stand in line. And then they just changed that to an office where we all can see each other and work. But most of the time, that's the most distracting thing if you're trying to do deep work. And so now people are looking like, how can we connect? Like, can we do this on a call? Can we do this maybe once a week? We meet up in a co-working space. So these are the things I think is like people are looking at why they're meeting more and how to do it in a way that's more efficient. From a health and wellness standpoint, it's not actually that good to have to go to work every day. I remember when I lived in New York City, like the one day at home a week that I was allowed to work remotely, it was like so good for my nervous system, like to not have to get on the train every day. But I see in the future, people, they were locked down for 2 years and they really want to travel. So I see a lot of people reaching out to me asking, not only can I work remotely, but how do I live abroad and work remotely? How do I travel? I see you doing it. How do I let my teams do this? So what I'm in the middle of launching is like people can go through a program with me where they transition to remote, but then they can come and do work away retreats. And we see this with a lot of like Salesforce and these big companies that are buying like whole wellness centers because they're not needing to have people come into an office ever during the year, but they're going to let them come to the wellness center 1 week of the year and like really come together in like a deeper way, in a way that actually builds relationships, not just like the, you know, the 5-minute small chat that you have at work.
And I hear from what you're saying that, you know, thinking about the months ahead and making this new recipe work, you know, allowing people to work from home, from anywhere, we'll touch on that distinction. It takes many lenses to think about the ideal configuration. You said wellness is one thing. I hear office in the way that office needs to be reconfigured from an architectural standpoint. I mean, who are these experts that, you know, can help you think about the ideal setup? It's not just an HR issue, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this is why I see health and wellness keep popping up, like it's almost like remote work and then health and wellness. And it's because I think people are realizing when you don't need to worry about the office, that most of the management skills comes from health. Like, is my employee actually in an environment at home? Do they have enough structure? Are they supported enough emotionally, at least on a team level, where they can get their work done? So it becomes less about like management and more about like trust and like working with your employees. And I would say 90% of the consultants that you see out there or stuff, they have no freaking clue what they're doing. Like most of us are just like barely scratching the surface of understanding what this even means. I've happened to have spent like, you know, 10 years doing trauma awareness training, psychology. I have a background in law. So like for me, I look at it more of like a human science perspective. And I find that super fascinating. And these are the things I get really geeky about, is like, you know, we can have all the tech tools that we want, but like, are people going to want to show up do we have a culture within our team where people really want to engage every day and do good work? Those are the things that we need to be asking.
Yeah, I mean, you know, one article that I was reading is that strange situation where people go back to the office to actually be sitting on Zoom calls. You know, it just doesn't seem to make sense. Okay, I mean, that's interesting. And I mean, now for a necessary distinction, remote work is not necessarily equal to working from home, right?
I would say remote work is like just not in your office, and then working from home is working from home. So when I first worked, when I wanted to go to Costa Rica, like back in 2014, my boss was like, I'm fine with you working remotely from home. And I was like, okay, let me try that. And then he's like, okay, I'm fine with you working remotely if it's in another state, because I was in California at the time. And so I like went and visited some friends. So I kind of did it in baby steps. And then he was like, okay, I'm fine with you working remotely outside the country as long as it's in the same time zone.
Just noticing that work kept on being done, right? So one step at a time, giving you a bit more leeway in how you organize your personal setup.
And this is what I advise everyone to do. In my teams, if I'm coaching someone individually, like it's like just baby steps, like allow your nervous system, because what people don't realize is that they're so structured to have everything completely monitored and managed for them, that when they drop into a remote work setting, a lot of times they don't know what to do with all their free time. They don't know how to manage their own schedule and keep themselves motivated in these things. And those things are, I think, things that you need to work out before you start traveling and working remotely. Like traveling, working remotely is like, you know, once you've graduated from those steps, it's like the next level.
So it takes almost like a handbook to be offered to those that have never experienced that. I'm going to say freedom, but options. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say that this is the natural thing that I came to, was like employers didn't trust their employees to work remotely, like to actually get work done, because the only media out there at the time, like around 2018 when I started my YouTube channel, was like people working on a laptop on the beach, which if you work remotely, you would never bring your laptop on the beach, like nowhere near the beach, because of, you know, getting it broken and all these things. And then the second thing was like, yeah, they didn't know how to do it. So I made a YouTube channel. I got a bunch of money in sponsorship, and I traveled all over Europe and Africa, interviewing companies, staying at co-living retreats where people like work remotely and live together, and just being completely immersed in it and filming the whole thing, because I was like, this is what it's like. You can show your employer, this is what it's like. You can show yourself, you can educate yourself. And some of those videos have like 30,000 views now. And I'm like, who is watching this? Like sometimes I get confused. But then I think, okay, this is why I made it. Is I just really want to help people. I really believe in like giving everyone the option, because I think it's like our own little ticket to freedom. You know, when you have complete control over your schedule, it's everything.
And we've started touching on benefits for workers, employees. You were mentioning in your own case back in New York, saving at least one day of commute equal, you know, kind of like a wellness boost. I mean, what are the other benefits for people? The ones that people have reported when, you know, you discussed, the one that you've noticed from your side, the one that companies have probably captured, monitored, maybe aside from that wellness part?
Yeah, I mean, for companies, the best benefit is they're saving on overhead for their offices. Lots of, I mean, when I most of the time I had my employer pay for my commuting, so that's also an overhead for them. And then, you know, from a monetary standpoint, when your employees are hitting burnout, like you have to train a whole new person.
Yeah.
And that is really like, or you could just let your employer like do something that's good for them, run their own schedule, blah, 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 and then you can keep them longer. So there's lots of like win-wins for both sides. I always like to say the employer first, because they're like, what I don't like is remote work. Everyone thinks it's like this benefit that we're giving employees.
Yeah.
When in reality, if we look at it from the situation of like, how best can they get their work done in a way that's most efficient and saves me the most amount of money? And when you really look at the statistics, working remotely is actually the best for the employer. A lot of times we have to work with employees because they don't know how to run their schedule and they end up working too much. And then they get burnt out from working too much because they don't have a separation from like home and office yet. So because if they're at home working, they don't know how to turn themselves off sometimes.
So on the one side, employers need to be convinced, and, you know, these elements of ROI are the ones to convey to them. Whereas on the employee side, it's more about how do you get to do it? How do you get to transfer from that previous office setup 5 days a week or 6 days a week for some to, you know, baby steps, then, you know, more freedom, then more ability to arrange or work from anywhere setup. Okay, that's interesting. I mean, from your side, what does your daily work from anywhere routine look like?
I'll give you what happened today. So I woke up and I meditated, did yoga. I went to a yoga class. I had a catch up with a friend. I went to the beach with my dog, and then I had consulting calls, business coaching calls, this interview, more coaching calls, and then I'm at 10 o'clock at night. I'm on another conference, another webinar conference.
Okay.
So I'm a panelist, and then in the middle, I'm going to go to sunset at the beach with my dog. So it's like, it's a lot of like, I don't feel like I'm on all the time, but it's a lot of time management. So I have to be constantly checking my calendar to make sure. And what I do is I block off certain days of the week that are my computer days and certain days of the week in-person days, because I have a community space. I'm doing stuff in the community here. So Thursdays for me is like, okay, I know that like 5 or 6 hours of my day is going to be like on the computer talking to people, and that's okay. And also this is what I teach people is like, for me, Monday is deep work. I don't do any calls. I don't really talk to anyone. It's just like I get a bunch of stuff done, set up my week. Tuesday and Wednesday is working, kind of doing calls. Thursday is major external day. And then Friday is my community day where I'm in person talking to people here.
Okay.
So that's me.
And any other, I mean, you're touching on practical tips, and time management it seems to be one important piece. Any other tips, you know, you'd want to share for someone who's ready to jump on a working from anywhere wagon?
I would say try and get your deliverables as clear as possible from your employer, because when you're dropped into a remote work setting, it's like really hard to understand if you're doing a good job. And because we're so programmed to be in the office and someone's always there like saying yes, no, good job, or like whatever, if you're alone, it can be very isolating, and sometimes it's really important for time management. And then I would say find people who are also working remotely outside of your team. And this is easy to do in a co-working space, or, I mean, if you're traveling abroad, it's really easy to do because there's like whole digital nomad communities that if you're looking for wanting to travel somewhere, you can just on Facebook type in the city and then digital nomads, and there's usually a Facebook group. And I always recommend people to join those Facebook groups way ahead of them traveling there, and you can kind of see how the community's like, get a vibe, figure out what you like. You can even ask questions into it, you know, so yeah.
Okay. I mean, at this point, I've been asking lots of questions, asking our audience to do the same as well. And a couple of questions just came up already, but guys, feel free to, you know, type in those questions in Zoom or on LinkedIn. I mean, first one for you, Brittnee, is where was your favorite place to work from? I mean, aside from Thailand, which became home eventually, any other spot that really stuck in your mind?
For sure. I love Lisbon. So Portugal is a major digital nomad hotspot. Lisbon is really good. Bali's beautiful. I spent many years in Bali, but now it's getting very overrun. But it's a very beautiful spot, and it has a good digital nomad community there. So I highly recommend people at least try it. Cape Town is really beautiful, and it's starting to be a big digital nomad hotspot, and it's very affordable there. I think I also love it because it reminds me of California. Berlin has randomly a really good digital nomad scene, even though it's a city. There's like this alternative side of like hipster digital nomads and people going to the park in the middle of the day. So
I was going to say, it like your ideal spot seemed to be attached to, you know, sun, warm, seaside. Is there any other option for those that are allergic to sun? So Berlin could be one.
Berlin is amazing, and it's got like so much culture, you know, and a good community there. I also really enjoyed Rio. I guess it's also on the beach, but it's very city. I don't know, maybe I'm just a beach person. I would say that most of the people who work remotely and travel, we really like the beach.
So no spot in Alaska you could recommend us, or okay.
No.
Another question popping up right now is, I mean, what's next in store for you in terms of destination? You're in Chiang Mai, and is there any set destination already? You were mentioning also an aspiration, you know, create a family, or at least investigate what, you know, digital nomad plus founding a family could look like.
Yeah, I'm actually on Koh Phangan, so I spent 5 years in Chiang Mai, and now I live on a tiny island in the islands, which is way more by the beach, which I love. But yes, so what my next plan is, I'm going to do a trip to do market research on other intentional communities. So in 2018, I did the trip around Europe for digital nomads, remote work, very specific to like working remotely, something more for corporates. And this is more like for me, and also for a lot of people are getting the same idea of, you know, we've lived abroad for a long time and we work remotely, but now we're starting to have families. Is there a way that we can have like a digital I don't want to say digital nomad, and it's not digital nomad, it's not expat, something in the middle of communities, something evolving here. And there's a lot of these in Europe. So I want to go and visit them and see what's working, what's not, because I'm planning to build one here. And these people, you know, a lot of them come from corporate backgrounds, but they just want to kind of retire in community and work remotely and live simply. So a lot of them grow their own food, they raise their kids together, and they're still like really into environmentalism and sustainability. And this is what I've always been into. So I'm going to go, I think, to Portugal, Sweden, Berlin. There's a bunch of places in Europe that have these communities. I'm in the middle of making a list and getting sponsorship for this trip. And because I always like to film it, because I think like whatever I'm learning, everyone else can learn as well. So yeah, that's what I'm going to do next. I'm super excited. So I'll be in Europe this summer traveling around. And I haven't left Thailand since COVID. And I used to be in a different country every month. So this is like, I'm really excited to see what is out there.
Excellent. So more episodes to look forward to on your YouTube channel. We'll make sure to post the link for the YouTube channel on our side. Guys, any other questions from your side? It looks like you know, all the questions came up already. Okay, I mean, if no other questions, and we're coming at time now, a very warm thank you from our side, Brittnee, for making yourself available and sharing, you know, practical, valuable insights on this, as you said, like, you know, current transition period for a lot of us. Now it seems like it's a reality that majority can touch, or at least had the chance to experience. And sometimes we don't know how to go about it, and, you know, how to move forward. So thanks a lot for all the knowledge you shared, and let's be in touch. And guys, more Klaxoon live sessions coming up in a few weeks. Bye for now, Brittnee. Bye.